and welcome back once again to a new Blue Protocol video at last. I'm very happy to say that today I'm sharing my own gameplay at long last after playing during the very first closed beta test over this weekend. We've covered the game and different aspects of it based on dev streams and trailers in the past, but now I can really dive in and share my very own experiences. A massive shout out and thank you to Technician. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to access the beta, so he's an absolute champ. Please note that since this beta was held for just Japan, text on screen and everything with the UI is of course in Japanese, and there is an occasional latency spike while I'm doing combat, but it basically had no effect on anything really. So, my name is Olo, and today I'm going to be talking about my favourite features of the Blue Protocol closed beta. Let's get started with the first topic, the world of Blue Protocol and its core content. Leveling in this MMO can come in lots of different forms. It's actually pretty awesome, but let's start with the obvious one for now, questing. We have 5 types of quests so far. Main quests for the overarching story, which will vary in tasks that they request, but generally reward massive XP as you might expect. Then we have combat quests like slaying X amount of enemies, gather quests featuring many nodes you find around the map but with a target type in this case, errand quests such as speak to this or that person, which are great for tutorials like teaching you who does what in the hub and why they're useful to you. And then finally we have traverse quests, which ask you to go to specific places or reveal areas. Nothing crazy there, simple and easy to understand even as someone who couldn't read the text. Even better is that they're all laid out by colour, so I know it's a gather quest immediately because it's got a green background, for example. Or if it's got a red background, I know I should probably prioritize it since that's a main quest, that kind of thing. But like I said, questing isn't the only way to level. The way the world is laid out is specific instanced areas that are generally quite large. Each area defined by its borders that when you pass through you face a short loading screen. Why I quite like this system compared to, say, true open world is because each area was very intentionally designed. Its layout, what was in it, seem to have been considered with more care because of that. The very way that you reveal the map is super satisfying. You have to go out and find these special nodes that reveal a chunk of the area, removing those clouds in one spot. Often they're hidden in bushes, up high on a rock you have to climb up, or down a giant waterfall you carefully work your way down. You genuinely need to explore to actually reveal the map, and because of that I felt the desire to explore for the simple sake of exploring. You know, I want to reveal the map. And while I'm doing that, I might find many hidden chests with useful materials all over the place. So thanks to the hidden items, the map reveal nodes, I could just happily wander around, unlocking areas, picking up good loot from my travels, and still be making massive XP gains thanks to the mini-boss system. Mini-bosses are powerful, wild imajinn that spawn at specific locations at different times. To say the least, they're much stronger than your average enemy and quite dangerous to fight in the area that they spawn. So say you're fighting mobs that are around level 5 in an area, and the mini-boss that spawns in that area will probably be around, let's say 8 or 9 for example. Not too out of reach, but a proper challenge for your level. You know, if this wasn't an MMO that is, it's much less of a big epic battle right now and more like,
how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
Seriously though, look at this. Every single mini-boss I ever saw was absolutely dogpiled. It was just funny. We'd be stunning and smashing it into the ground, the poor thing. Thanks to the way tagging works in this game, you only need to hit an enemy once to get full credit and potential loot full XP. So whenever these bad boys spawn, everyone in the area will just drop what they're doing and rush straight at it to get one hit in before it dies. And the reward for killing it is a large chunk of XP and a piece of that imajinn, basically like an essence of it. What's actually fantastic about this mini-boss system is that I could drop questing for a while completely, just explore around the world, reveal the map, find hidden loot, and then chase mini-boss spawns that spawned in the area near me. I can actively continue leveling while exploring instead of just doing hardcore questing, which I absolutely love. With the freedom of movement in Blue Protocol, the jumps are pretty high. You know, I jump very high up. The falls seem to damage you very little compared to what you expect. Like the fall damage is super forgiving, so you can climb up and down way more than you might originally think. You can find some awesome views or use your brain to find clever ways to reach different areas. It all seems pretty intentional thanks to the many surprising bits of loot and area reveal nodes in areas that I just didn't expect to find them. For getting around the world, you might explore the hub or the world itself and find teleporters that allow you to fast travel to them once you've activated them once. Currently in the beta, there was one main village outside of the original hub city city, so I was able to quickly travel between those two whenever I needed as like a core location, but I haven't found any others yet. To help you travel the world though, we also have these fox imajinn as mounts, which are unlocked via a simple quest. I've got to assume that it's going to be harder or more expensive to unlock mounts in the future game, the full game, but right now they basically let you sprint around the land super quick on a cooldown, which was kind of a fun way to have mounts in your game. Rather than them be like a permanent, just slight speed increase, they're a temporary, crazy fast increase. So while we mentioned the hub, let's continue talking about it. This large and beautiful city is sort of the centerpiece of the map. It's basically a place to access the main tools you need to progress in the world, like crafting, upgrading, the imajinn workshop, a bounty board, the PvP arena, class swapping, item transformation, buying and selling, all that good stuff. The place was absolutely packed with players everywhere I went, often interacting with each other in their own way, be it emotes, cute anime-esque characters in the chat, you know, emojis, and of course, dance formations, conga lines, rituals to dogs, you know, the usual. It's all super easy to access after you first explore it, featuring a bunch of teleporters you can activate to blast around the city in specific areas, from the bottom of the beach to the top of the spire at the cathedral. It's all super easy to access whatever you're after. I just thought it was very well designed, basically. And you'll come back to this hub very regularly, basically after each venture out into the world, to come back and appraise items, restock, hand in quests, pick up new ones, and very importantly, upgrade or craft new gear. So let's get into the meat and bones of crafting. While you explore the world, you might find secret items, defeat an enemy and pick up its material, or like, you know, pick up a horn or whatever. When you come back to the hub, you appraise all the items you've collected to reveal what it is you've gathered, and then they're taken from your inventory and slapped into your storage. This storage is accessible wherever you are in the hub. You don't need to faff around with them in your inventory. It's just with you always, but not actually taking up any actual space, which is very convenient. Using these resources, you can craft potions for survival, new gear and weapons, the talismans, which I actually have no idea what they're actually called, by the way, and most importantly, imajinn. Crafting gear requires different parts depending on the gear of choice. In my case, I wanted to craft the first dungeon weapon from the Dragonclaw Valley. That meant that I needed to go kill the dungeon boss a couple times to gather its essence, 3 of those specifically, and then I needed 10 boar horns from the big dangerous ones specifically, and then a whole bunch of other materials from the fox humanoids in the area too. Once I actually worked that out, it was kind of a breeze to do, and you can see a lot of other players in my footage running around with other Dragonclaw weapons, or even higher level stuff too. I can even see the next set of dungeon weapons in the crafting menu, for example. In the case of crafting imajinn, it's similar. We need to defeat the imajinn type we're after, and the mini boss of its type too. Let's say I wanted to get myself this red fox, who is a sort of fire AoE attacker. Well, then I would need to hunt him specifically to gather a few of his essence, and then other foxes or similar types to him. Eventually, I'd build up enough resources to then be able to craft him, like I did with this little healing boar. I defeated the mini boss and then hunted down a few little boars as well, the regular version, and boom, now he's part of my squad, which is really cool. You can go out and fight big scary bosses or mini bosses and then basically have them work for you, all working in different ways. Healing, fighting, CCing, casting buffs. It's great. And since you can only have 2 equipped at any one time, you've got to pick and choose which setup you're going to run based on what you need as a solo player, or maybe what your team needs. I've already made a whole video about imajinn already, so check that out if you want to learn more about them. While the talisman, again, I'm not sure if they're actually called that, are crafted much the same, using resources from around the world and then equipping them to give yourself passive stats like damage and health. We have several slots to equip multiple talismans, but only specific talisman go into specific slots depending on their shape. And then we can upgrade all of these things too, which is thankfully super simple. Weapons, imajinn, talisman, they all have power levels, and the higher those levels are, the stronger it is in their effects too. Weapons that I'd unlocked had varied levels of power, starting with your beginner weapon at 1 out of 7, and the first dungeon weapon which had 1 out of 12. We pour resources into these weapons to raise their level, and depending on the quality of those resources, say gems and powerful imajinn essences, the bigger the upgrades you get, maxing out whatever cap the weapon has. Similarly, the talismans are upgraded just like this, and so are the imajinn. I always seem to have the resources I needed to upgrade these though, always able to do big chunks of upgrading the moment I had a new item. And it was nice to have this goal in mind whenever I went out into the world to make sure I came back with new resources to do some upgrading. So we've talked about world content and crafting now, let's finally talk about the combat. From the trailers, it looked good. From the information we could read about talents and how they worked, sounded great. I'm happy to say from my experience, it's exactly like that in play. It's some of the most simple but satisfying combat I've played in an MMO. It's that combat style, short cooldowns that flow into each other around chain attacks, parries, and your imajinn summons too. I'd hit a combo into an ability, into a different combo, into a summon, followed by a parry. Dude, sometimes enemies would be dead before I did everything I planned to, and so I'd have to pull multiple and herd them up and do some big wombos. In dungeons and boss fights, it gave me more time to experiment and have fun with it, because, you know, they've got more health to work with. The entire beta, I was trying to get as far as I could with an aegis fighter, the sword and shield class, but at any time, I could have gone to the respec guy in the hub to try a new weapon. That would reset my progress though, and I'd need to craft and upgrade a new weapon. In Blue Protocol, you can play all 4 classes happily on one character, but you need to level them up respectively. So my level 14 aegis fighter is still going to be level 14 when I come back to that class, but my mage is level 1 until I start playing and leveling up that specifically. As we progress and level up a class, we unlock each ability slot by level 6. So you've got, at that point, your chain attacks, your 4 basic abilities, and the ultimate of your class too. From here, we can level up our chain attack combos to have different effects or different ways to use them, like I did with stabbing or AoE attacks with my combos. You can unlock passive stats, and also at level 10, we start to pick up and choose alternative versions of each ability. At the moment, we have 2 versions of each basic ability to choose between. I'm sure there's going to be more ultimates for each class in the future. To give an example, my AoE blast that I did could be turned into an overtime AoE effect instead. Then we have a choice between 2 modifiers on up to 3 skills after that. So basically, you've got lots of choice on how the specific details work on each ability, allowing you to create a pretty unique kit for your class every time. The passive effects are stat modifiers with a choice between 12 passives total and the ability to equip up to 3 of those at any one time. So lots of choice, lots of variety in your classes. The ability to swap between all of the current 4 classes at any time is pretty good. I'm very ready to play the next beta and try a new class. Let's talk dungeons next though. The dungeons as we progress the story were solo content so far. You just progress through a relatively linear setup, working your way through various enemies, mini bosses, and encounters, and then face a boss at the end. There are some hidden items as you progress through, so you gotta keep your eyes open for that, and the very useful buff totems that can give you health, move speed, or best of all, big damage buffs. You do have a time limit to complete each dungeon, but it was very forgiving in these starter ones. But I imagine in the future with raiding, those time limits will matter a lot more. These reward a good chunk of XP, resources, or even armor pieces. Standard dungeon MMO stuff really, but what was really interesting after this was when I cleared out the Dragonclaw Valley dungeon, suddenly that area opened up into a new world area that I could go to on the map. So I could technically go into the dungeon again, but this time loads of other players were there too, wandering around like anywhere else on the map. This is actually the dungeon we saw in the dev streams, and as it turns out, it wasn't the Dragonclaw dungeon, it was the Dragonclaw Valley gauntlet. There's no time limit, you just progress through the valley fighting enemies who ended up in there after you cleared it out originally. And it's filled with loot relevant to the dungeon, so crafting those dungeon weapons is great here. A lot of players came here to farm out mini bosses who set up camp after you cleared the dungeon, or farm resources for crafting those weapons too. As we get deeper and deeper into the dungeon though, the mobs get harder and harder and higher level too. Towards the end we had some very dangerous ones with telegraph danger areas, massive health pools that required many players just to fight. I managed to actually make it all the way to the end, at the back of the original dungeon, to the area where I fought the original boss. The mobs at this point though were well over my level at around level 34, while I was just level 13. All the mobs do respawn eventually, and there's tons of good loot in here, so it felt like a gauntlet I could push through that got harder and harder, with good loot as I went, and a really cool way to basically grind out XP and farm resources and specific loot. Finally, let's do a quick talk on the vibe of Blue Protocol, the aesthetic. At any time, I could just press the key N and I could hide all my UI and take a real look at the game. It's fantastic. The visuals of this game just do it for me. It's that sort of cel-shaded, simple, colourful vibe that I really like. The areas are well designed, fun to explore, the music was always catchy and enjoyable, the large selections of emotes, emojis for the chat, general RP ability is already solid too. It just feels like a well-realised world, and I just want to learn more about it. I'd love to be able to talk about the story in this video, but I barely knew what was going on considering the language barrier, but it didn't matter too much. I could just happily follow along with the cinematics. I'm obviously looking forward to the next beta and generally Western release for this game, so I hope to be able to make more videos soon. What do you think about Blue Protocol after this beta? Did you get to play it all or watch any streams? Be sure to check out my other videos on the game if you want to learn more about it. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them in the comments if I can. Either way, for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you next time.